Welcome to Bold Talk series where creativity, leadership, ideas, and innovation come together. My name is Epi Ludvik, and today I have a privilege to have a short one-on-one conversation with Oren Kesler, CEO at Wikistrat, redefining strategic consultancy by tapping into the collective intelligence of thousands of experts around the world, better known as crowds and crowdsourcing. Oren, great seeing you. Welcome to our Bold Talk series. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for hosting me on the podcast here, and much appreciated for being a guest here.
Of course, always great to reconnect, Oren. We know each other for a long time. It'll be great to have a good discussion about the work that you're doing with Wikistrat. But first, let's go with the start. So you started out in a world where expert advice was centralized, exclusive, and slow. What was the first crack you saw in that system that the moment you realized that had to be a better way to do crowdsourced consultancy?
I think the number one issue that for some extent still exists today, but we do bring a solution to that, is that there was lacking a diversity of opinion. Essentially, the information may have been diversified because of the amount of sources that gave it to you, but the analysis, the wisdom that comes from interpretation of the information and providing a different point of view, that was lacking. And that was definitely something that when we saw that, we said, okay, we can provide you not only with a solution, but we can also provide something that will give value to the experts participating in those discussions and those kind of activities, such as the one that we run.
Nice. Now, walk us back a little bit here. So, the idea of a crowdsourced strategic intelligence first came to you. Was it a spark or something that built over time? And, where do you see, given the fact that I mean, all the big consultancy groups, but where do you see the future consultancy happening?
I would say that the number one thing that kind of sparked the idea of providing crowdsourced consulting is that over time we start to see that the value is increasing in terms of what the clients are getting out of it and in terms of what the experts participating in those kind of activities are getting out of it. And that value was essentially number one, learning, number two, networking. And the number three was that it was challenging. It was very, for them, it was very something that was kind of like entering an MBA class and then somebody present a case and they were very, very sure about their answer. They were very sure about how they're going to provide an answer or a solution for a problem or a challenge that we presented to them. And all of a sudden, everything changed in the classroom, so to speak, the discussion, because people with different opinion, people from a diversified background kind of challenged them in a way that they didn't think about. It's the unknown that was presented to them in live. And that definitely was the I would say, the thing that kind of grabbed and make the difference here. When we look into the world of consulting where it's changing, and I'm guessing everybody are talking about AI. Yes, that's definitely changing everything. I do see the value of experts increasing a lot, because the value the experts bring today and crowdsourcing with the experts brings today is that it doesn't replace the AI. It basically provided with something to complement it and verify it and to also challenge it. And that is something that we're seeing more and more need for. We are being asked more and more to provide opinion, to provide analysis. Experts thought about how can the experts help us to design the AI, give different values to the models that the AI is using, but also can you help us to go over that first layer, which is the AI provided us with an answer. Can the experts review it and then think of an additional aspects that the AI should be doing that they missed? And I think that's where it's changing. More AI for sure. That's, I'm guessing all the other guests will talk about that and talked about that the same. But more use of experts. What we are seeing on the negative side, so to speak, is we kind of losing the middleman. So traditional consulting that had a lot of in-house consulting, consultants that came from MBA classes and MBA grad schools and so on, that are very smart people, very intelligent, but they were not expert on a specific topic. They were very good in adapting and applying their ability to learn fast, to learn a new project. Those people, we kind of see them shrinking out. They're still there, but less, because the AI is helping us to overcome that need. And in this case, for us as Wikistart, it's actually beneficial because we were never that kind of a consulting. But for the traditional ones, it's definitely painful.
Yeah. Uh, well, it's very interesting because so you look at, for example, the insights that the consultancies they build is basically around their own walls, right? And then you see with the AI could be also the same thing because you're kind of like you're training a large language model. So that's also another problem, like inside within those walls as well. Do you think with crowdsourced model, it's hard? I truly believe that the crowdsourced model is the way to go because the power of a crowdsourced model is that it's also goes back to like finding what are the root cause of the problem that is being presented in the first place, right? So that's core DNA of crowdsourcing is so powerful. Was there ever a moment you wonder if that openness would create more noise than value?
I think noise is an inseparable part of the process of crowdsourcing. You'll never have a clean, pure insights when you're doing crowdsourcing. It's not going to happen. But what we do know is that if we structure it well, meaning that we lay the foundation for the discussion in a well planned and organized way, we bring in the right people, fundamental. We identify the right people during the process also. So some people may be good on paper, some people are amazing in real life, but they're not good on paper. So while we identify that, and more things that we do as well. Once we do all of that, the insights you get for crowdsourcing, I would say at the moment, maybe 15, 20 years from now, all will change with the AI. But at the moment, I don't see anything coming close to replace that. And I'm talking from the experience that we have in our projects that we compare what we could have get from or what we have tried to get from AI tools for different projects versus what the experts provide us. It's like night and day, not in the details, not in the way it's written, not in the way it's presented, but in the level of thought. The level of thinking is so much more challenging, much more intellectual in this sense. And you don't see that with the AI. The AI is kind of repetitive of what's already out there. So it's going to give us more of what we see, maybe formulated in a different way. Maybe once in a while we see a spark of opinion, which is different. The experts, they come in and they challenge themselves and they even ask questions, but those are not stuff that they take from around them. That's the stuff that as people who been living this topic or a theme for a long time, it's easier for them to produce those kind of insights. And that's something massive, and I don't think that's going to change.
Yeah. Now, you're working with governments and Fortune 500 companies. What are some of the blind spots these powerful organization institution consistently bring into your simulations?
Well, it's interesting. I think the number one thing we always notice is they don't like to think of the worst case or the best case scenarios that much. And the way we build it structurally is that we force our experts working with the clients to discuss those. So I think that's number one. Number two, organization really love the big data. And to make decisions that are based on big data, that's great. There is a structural problem with that. The data is based on what's collected in the ecosystem where you retrieve the data from. So if it's from the internet or if it's from a closed data a network that you create and so on, the experts bring in something that is not in an ecosystem. It's based on them being underground or based on their experience. So it's hard to quantify it. And those organizations are very quantitative oriented. They have to see kind of tangible issues and problems that can be approached, and they're less qualitative. And that's great. That's good. But when you add crowdsourcing to that, when you had a crowd of experts to that kind of a process, it creates better insights and they challenge structural insights because the quantitative has a way to kind of confirm sometimes a lot of the ways that those companies are working. It's kind of a inner circle of a confirmation that provide them with their biases and so on. When you bring someone from outside, usually it used to be those consulting firms that used to come from outside and kind of shock the boat a little bit, rattle it. Today they don't do it that much because they're also part of the whole AI and quantitative way of looking at things. When you bring those experts, they really manage to rattle the boat in a way, and that's really good because it challenged them. So I think the number one thing that we're saying all the time is we challenge the status quo. We challenge the main opinion. We challenge the mindset. Organizations don't do that. They would love to say they do it. They would love to build in structurally in the system of decision making or strategic planning that they have ways to do that, but they don't for various reasons. But the number one is because if it's unbroken, why fix it kind of a way, right? So they don't feel something is broken in it. But then you bring in something else and that shows them, you know what, you can do it much better. And I think that's the number one issue and challenge that those organizations have. the challenging of the conception, the challenging of the conventional wisdom almost does not, I won't say it doesn't exist, but is not executed to the level they would love it to be. And the people from the organization themselves are telling us, I wish we would have done it this way, but we can't. They literally use the word can't. Not that they don't want to, they just can't. Shows you how difficult it is.
Yeah. Well, that also tells us that, we're living in a world that, even though that, like innovation has been brought in a front desk of the C-level executives, and transparency, we still have a way to go with that. And you operate with methodology that emphasizes transparency and open source thinking. How do you balance that with the confidentiality and control many of your customers demand?
So the idea of balancing is always to make sure that the participants who provide us with their analysis feel comfortable knowing that they're not doing something which is wrong. And the number one rule, and I would say that's kind of the guiding rule for everything, is don't do something that you have a doubt about. If you feel that you're going to share information or share something that maybe you shouldn't be sharing, don't share it. We can live without it. We're not looking for the specific details, information that could be problematic. We're looking for the thinking. We're looking for the mindset. And that's usually not something which is problematic. That's not a problem to ask for that kind of a thing. The second thing is we don't ask directly for things. We ask for questions that provide us answers that kind of goes back into that, which is the thinking. So there's a lot of thinking around what are we asking and how do we formulate the question. And that's, I would say, in the process of designing a collaborative exercise with experts, goes a lot of thinking into who do we bring, what are we going to ask them, how are we going to ask them, what is it that we want them to answer, meaning what are the limitations we put in the altitude of the answer, meaning are we asking for something very specific, very low altitude, or very kind of a high thinking, high altitude. And then only then we go into, well, we have legal mechanisms and so on that we put in place, which I would say are more technical, but are not as protective in the end of the day, as much as a person who basically knows this is where I can do it, this is where I feel comfortable with, versus this is what I'm not feeling comfortable. And that's the bottom line in the end, because someone who feels comfortable sharing will share. Someone who doesn't feel comfortable sharing will not share. And I think that's where we always aim for, to make everybody feel comfortable with this experience and not to feel that we are forcing them or pushing them to kind of squeeze the lemon for more kind of a information that not necessarily had any value.
Yeah, well said. Now, in a world where information is so accessible everywhere, what makes curated expertise so valuable? And how do you ensure that the value translates into action within your platform? And the other things that I wanted to also know about your experts within the platform. What is the number one reason that gets them motivated to be part of the simulation too?
So for the first question, I would say we're living in a world where information is abundant, but I
Yeah.
would say it's overflooding. There's too much information. It's the idea of the separating between noise and signal. We always go back to that when we're
Or
doing our exercises. So from Epi, did you hear me? I think I got disconnected there.
you got disconnected.
All right.
Okay.
So I'll answer that again. So we're in a world today that there's an abundant overflooding of information. And we go back to a discussion, which is a traditional discussion about information, which is signal versus noise. You always want to aim for the signal, but you have to separate the signal from the noise, the fat from the meat, so to speak. And in this process, value of the experts really, really comes to place, because an expert can tell you, look, this is signal. It's missing from. It's not only that we have a lot of information, we have a lot of disinformation. There's a lot of fake news and a lot of misinformation being spread. So an expert, that's where their value in basically saying, look, this is where you need to focus on. This is where is the signal. This is where we're looking ahead into the future. Will have an impact. This is the important thing. So the first thing about that, I would say, when we have all of this abundance of information, is you need the experts more than ever before, because they will help you not only identify what's misinformation or what's the signal versus the noise. They will also help you to define the questions and the process in order to identify what is it that you really need. Sometimes we completely change it based on our interaction with them. Based on the what is the type of experts, what are they getting at that question, what the experts get from being part of this kind of a crowdsourcing and the what I call interactive collaborative analysis. The number one, we always run a survey at the end of our exercise. The number one answer I always get is learning. The experts learn a lot. This is the idea of learning from exercises that you've done is something that has so much value that they appreciate that more than the financial value. They appreciate that more than the networking and more than the status. Sometimes we talk about status, social status. Are you part of the group or are you not part of the group and so on? The learning part is what really, really pushes them because they are being challenged. And some of them come back to us after every exercise and say, I haven't been dealing with those questions for years. I wish I would have done it every week because it really challenged you. And they really enjoy that. They feel the joy of being a challenge, the joy of being engaging discussions with like level peers like them with expertise that they can exchange ideas. So that's where they gain from it. And I think that's the trick that I'll call it the secret ingredient that everybody asks me, what's the secret ingredient? I say, well, our experts really enjoy doing this with us because they really find it to be something that they can have value from.
Now, you mentioned about signal and noise. This was one of the way how Steve Jobs operated with the level of the intensity in terms of productivity, and it's amazing. Like when you start to apply that methodology in terms of between what's the signal, what's the noise, and how you can completely operate with a model of 80% signal and 20% noise, you can do incredibly amazing. Was that something that you got inspired from Steve Jobs, or you were more? How that model came to?
Yeah, I wish I had more lessons from Steve Jobs. And unfortunately, I don't. The process that we were talking about is a process that I would say was quite organic. Let me put it out flat. We made a lot of mistakes, a lot at the beginning. We changed our operational model and also our business model. I think in the first 5 years, so many times that sometimes I go back and I say, wow, we used to do it that way. Do you remember? And it's like, oh, we don't remember even we were doing that way. So I think the lessons about when you want to adapt a certain efficient way of dealing with information is to understand that you're probably going to get some stuff wrong. You need to be adaptable, flexible, and able to apply that fast back into the system where you are basically acquiring knowledge and creating wisdom out of it and insights. So the key word here is flexibility and the ability to also be not to be afraid to make mistakes and put that in a process. So it's not just to say, well, I'm not afraid to be wrong. I'm not afraid to take risks. It's about, okay, so what does it mean in the process later for the machine, for the organization, for the process that we're doing? So how do you take that and implement it immediately almost? It's not enough to say, well, I'm not going to repeat that mistake. Is how the organization benefit from it now, not in the future if you're facing the same problem. And I think that's what we always try to do. We always have a lesson learned kind of a research after an activity, which is the main question is what can we do better, but not at the end of the activity. We also do it during the activity itself. So this way we can immediately implement some of the mistakes that we're seeing that we're doing. So to have that ability to look retrospectively at stuff as they're going to generate insights that you can already implement while the process is going. And that's the focus. And I think for me individually, in decision making, I would say I made so many mistakes, but the ability to apply those lessons while I was in the process is what really helped me. And I think that's the number one thing that sometimes I feel people are kind of missing when they talk about it's not only about adapting, it's only when do you adapt and when do you apply the adaptation. And do you have a mechanism or do you have a system or a habit of taking those adaptation, taking those lessons learned and immediately implement them in the process, whatever that process is. Because if you just learn, so the next time will come maybe in 20 years and say, oh, I know better now, that's kind of missing the point, in my opinion. So it's also about the when, not only about the what and how.
Yeah, I mean, it's the applying it at the right place at the right time is the powerful thing. And so
Yes.
this is a well said. Oren, I love to carry on this conversation. This is a short format conversation. My last question will be is What does the word bold mean to you?
Well, I think for me, it's to make the decision that you're afraid to make. And that is much more, I think, a little bit more than just courageous. It's also intellectually to look at decisions in a way that is not with a bias, to look at decisions that you are about to make and say, do I really want to make them? And to be able to be bold enough, maybe sometimes not to make them, or to be courageous and say, you know what, it's counterintuitive, but my rationale tells me it's the right thing to do. So for me, bold is about making those decisions that sometimes we're worried or we're afraid or we like the appetite to make. That's what bold is.
Great. Oren, so great seeing you. Thank you for joining me this Bold Talks series, and looking forward to seeing you soon again. Until next time, take care, be great, and be bold always.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.